Ever wondered what your tax code means or whether it's right? Well, in this video, I'm going to blow your mind and explain it to you. When I was employed, I had zero idea about tax codes, did not understand them. There was some word that people used to use about emergency tax codes or basic rate and all this kind of stuff, but I honestly didn't have a clue. I wasn't interested, to be honest, at the particular time. But where it does start to hurt you is when you realise that you're actually paying vastly more tax than your friend who's also on the same amount as you, and you realise that your tax codes are different, and then it starts to trigger in your mind. You think, well, what's all this about? And I think as you get older as well, you tend to take more of an interest in those slips than you do when you're younger. So, and one of the things when I started to get really involved with tax many years ago is that it was one of the things that started that interest really, is looking at it and thinking, well, why am I paying this tax and what does this mean? And in this video, I'm going to explain to you what happened to me when somebody actually said to me, you know, this is all it means. And it was an absolute mind blown moment. So I'm going to explain it to you now. But before I do, if you like this video and you'd like to hear more of these types of things, click the subscribe button below and you'll be notified every time we release one. So are you ready for it? I'm going to explain now the key things. So let's say at the time we're recording this video, your tax code is 1250L. All that means is take that L, dump it off the screen, and then have 1250O. Stick another O on the end, becomes 12,500. And all that means is that's the amount per year you can earn without paying any tax. That's it. That is literally it. All you got to do is stick a zero on the end, and that gives you the amount of tax-free you're allowed. So obviously if you want to work out what monthly you can take tax-free, you just divide that by 12 and that gives you the answer. So in that example, about £1,041 a month you can have without paying any tax. Bear in mind there is national insurance, but I'm not going to cover that in this video. It'll be about an hour long and we'd be bored by the end of it, but national insurance is another kettle of fish all to itself. But yeah, from a tax point of view, that is it. So what are tax codes for is interesting. So if your code isn't £12,500 in this particular example, so we're talking now in the 2021 tax year. It changes every year. Most years with the budget, it tends to creep up. We've actually had a freeze on it this time round, so it's the same as the previous year, which is unusual. So it should go up every year by a small amount, presuming that the government want to put that limit up. And it's their way of collecting the right amount of tax. So if you suddenly had medical insurance or you had a company car, something like that, you would see your code come down, and that's so that they start taxing you more money, and that accounts for that extra tax on that new benefit that you've got. For those of you with company cars, I'd definitely go and check out your tax code, and you'll start to see how much tax you're actually paying on that car. And I think it'll be a bit of a shock to you. So go and have a look. Whether you do or not, I don't know. I mean, you might not all be as geeky as me, wanting to sit there and work it out, but it's an eye-opener, to say the least. So if you've not got L at the end, that's a common question that people say, why have I not got L? Sometimes you might have a T, which is a temporary code, or all these other letters that could be on there. You know, there's an M, there's a B, there's all sorts. Ultimately, if you're really keen to know the exact reason, you can go to gov.uk/tax-codes. I'll put the link in the description and you can see a list of them all there. But the one to keep an eye out is T. T is quite temporary. And then the key one at the end that you shouldn't be liking is what they call the emergency tax ones, which is where it says M1 or W1, which is month one or week one. So what that means is they're going to take your allowance. So in this example, 12,500 quid, and regardless of what else you've earned this year, and they're just going to give you that £1,041 tax-free in that month. Now where that can hurt you is if you've had a break from work, for example, and then you've come back in that first month, they would have, the software that people use tend to say, okay, well actually what has that person earned, what tax should they have paid based on this tax code, and then we'll work it out. And if they're due to pay less tax, or they're due sometimes tax back, we'll do that in this payslip. That code doesn't allow that to happen, so it is an emergency tax code. A lot of the time actually you pay the right amount of tax, but if you see that for a long time, then it can negatively affect your position. So, and actually sometimes it can negatively affect in terms of your pocket, but it could also later on you're not paying enough tax, and that can really sting when they claw it back in the next year, which they quite often do. So which brings me on to my next point, of if your tax code is actually lower than that figure and you don't have any benefits, check with Revenue and Customs what they've coded into your code to see, because quite often you might find you have actually got a debt from a previous tax year that they're bringing across this year because they didn't charge you enough the previous year, and it happens more often than you would imagine. We quite often see clients coming out of employment into self-employment, and it's very common for them to have this overhanging tax debt that's been rolled year on year on year. So check that out, just so you're in control of what's going on. Now the other code you might often see is BR, which is just basic rate, which is the basic rate of tax at 20%. So you'd often see that if you've got a second job. So if you imagine they can only apply this code to one job. So if you've got £12,500 and you've only got one job, your code would go on there at 1250 and it would all work out quite fine. But if you've got other jobs and let's say you earn over more, let's say you earn over £12,500 in your main job, and then you go and take a second as, say, as the delivery driver, something that's quite common as I'm recording this video at the moment, you would then probably have a BR tax code on there, because you should be rightly paying 20% at least on that income. So, and that's if you're a basic rate taxpayer, so you're earning under 50,000. So you see that code generally in second jobs. If it's your only job and you're on a BR, again, you should be asking your employer about that and HMRC. And the thing to note about your employer is they can't change it without HMRC saying so. So the way it tends to work is if you phoned the revenue up and said, oi, my tax code's wrong, and you had the discussion, they agreed, they would issue a new code to your employer, and the employer would put that in for the next pay run. So yeah, it is not entirely in control of the employer, because although the employer could go in and stick whatever they want in theory, that's not really the correct way to do things. So they wait for a prompt from Revenue and Customs. So Revenue and Customs should be your go-to if you've got any problems. Of course, if you've got an accountant, speak to them, but if you're not, then you do need to go to Revenue and speak to them about it. And there you have it, a whistle-stop tour of tax codes. There you go. You can surprise and delight people at your next dinner party by your tax knowledge. That's it. If you've enjoyed this and you want more tax tips just like it, obviously subscribe to the channel, but you can go to healandassociates.co.uk and sign up for our 2 weekly newsletter where we deliver all this type of content to you on a regular basis. See you on the next one.